To the Fitchburg Municipal Airport Commission meeting, April 17th. It's 6:02. Persons in attendance this evening are as follows. To my far left, Commissioner Eric Takal. To my left, immediate left, Paul Hathaway. Both of these gentlemen are new to the commission. I'd like to welcome them to tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you for your volunteering. To my far right, Richard Liberatore, and myself, Clayton Raymond, Chair. Also in attendance is Peter Kettle, Airport Manager, and we also have Mayor Squalia here this evening with us. Thank you for coming, Mayor. Members in attendance are also Jackie Marks of Gale Associates, and we also have a couple of representatives from the FPA, Mark Estabrook and Daniel Walton. Thanks for coming. All right, let's get to it. I'd like to approve last month's meeting minutes as they were sent via email through Secretary Richard Liberatore. Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion
Second.
to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Just a matter of housekeeping. If you are going to comment on any agenda item this evening, please feel free to walk up to the podium, state your name and the city in which you reside. And if anyone is recording this evening's minutes, please let me know. Thank you. Item 1, action items from previous minutes. I don't know that I have any action items to follow up on.
There isn't any. They're all covered in this month's agenda.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Correspondence to the commission. I did not receive any. Peter, did you?
No.
Anyone else? All right, item 3, Gale review of ongoing work. Jackie Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jacqueline Marks with Gale Associates for the record. Everyone should have a copy of Gale's monthly update in front of you this evening, so I'll just try to keep it moving along pretty quickly. Starting with Project 1 on page 1, the environmental assessment and wildlife hazard assessment. Good news on that front. Cheryl Quain, the environmental protection specialist over at FAA, has requested that Gale remove all references to draft on the environmental assessment, provide a summary of the public outreach efforts that were conducted as part of the project, and provide that to her. So we anticipate her issuing a finding of no significant impact on that project shortly. So that's really good news on that front. As far as the wildlife hazard assessment is going, the final surveys will take place in May of this year. Still to be scheduled, I believe, Peter, with New Earth Ecological. So following that final survey, the pre-draft wildlife hazard assessment report will be provided for airport and stakeholder review within 60 days. And then once, Gale and, the airport have a chance to go through and comment on that, it can be provided to FAA. And then FAA will ultimately approve the wildlife hazard assessment and then determine whether a wildlife hazard management plan is needed. If you recall, way back when we originally scoped the project, we did account an alternate item for the wildlife hazard management plan in the case that it was necessary as part of the project. So that's already covered under the existing grant if it's needed, and if not, we'll just forego that item, and the final wildlife hazard assessment report will become the final report as part of the project. So once the EA and the wildlife hazard assessment or, wildlife hazard management plan, if needed, are complete, the project can be closed out. So we're in good shape there. Any questions on the environmental assessment? All right, seeing none.
Jackie, sorry.
Sure.
I believe this has an input into the fencing that goes around the airport.
The fencing that goes around the airport was one of the projects that was, that was explored through the environmental assessment. Correct. Yeah.
Thank you. And the other thing, can I just say something?
Of course.
About 18 months ago, I applied for a depredation permit because of all the deer we were getting on the airport. And actually, I got it on Tuesday when I got back to work. So we've got that now.
Okay.
And all we've got to do is identify people that have the appropriate certificates from the FAA and the government to get in and cull some of the deer as and when necessary.
Okay, that took a while.
Yeah, it did. It certainly did.
Yeah.
The deer are back, and I brought friends.
Yeah, I bet they have. Mild winter.
Any other questions, comments on the EA? Okay, I'll move on. Item 2 on page 2, the design and permitting for the main apron reconstruction. So last month, the Airport Commission voted and authorized the chairman to enter into an agreement with Gale. Gale is preparing that agreement and intends on forwarding that to the commission chairman shortly. So just please stay on the lookout for that, and as that comes in, Mr. Chairman, if you could please execute that, we can move into that project. Any questions on the apron? That's just for the design portion of the project. Okay. So the groove and seal and remarking of runway 1432, which is going to be funded through Mass DOT's Airport Safety and Maintenance Program. Bid documents have been provided to Mary Delaney for bidding on March 28th. And so the project is currently out to bid. The pre-bid video call was held today at 10 a.m. It's anticipated that construction is going to begin sometime in May. There will be some temporary closures of the runway during the day while the grooving is being completed, but it's anticipated that at night, once construction is complete for the day, the runway will be able to open up to nighttime operations. There will be a period of time after the sealant is applied that the runway may need to remain closed until that friction testing is complete, but we're anticipating that that would hopefully be a matter of days, but that's still to be determined at this time, and we'll of course be, in coordination with Peter, as that goes along. So, really, again, at the last meeting, the Airport Commission voted to authorize the chairman to enter into an agreement with Gale. So once that agreement comes through, Mr. Chairman, if you could please sign that. But other than that, that is all I have for an update for everyone tonight. Are there any questions, anything that I can bring back to the office for our engineers?
Sorry, just to comment again, please.
Mm-hmm.
I had previously sent out an email to everybody at FACT and the Pilots Association saying that during the grooving taking place, that we could close the runway, we could open the runway up and allow certain planes coming into the businesses to be repaired, to take off when they've been repaired as well. And apparently, within the agreement that was done by Gale, it said that that would not happen. So I asked at the meeting this morning whether people could fly in prior to 7:30 and leave and fly again after 5. And they said they will make the runway clear in order for pilots to do that. There was one other thing that's just slipped my mind. Oh yes, I actually sent out an email advising everybody So hopefully FACT and the Pilots Association got that today, and that's been accepted. I've had no comments back from the businesses on the airport that it's not acceptable,
Okay,
which is good.
that is.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think
You're
it's great
welcome.
news. Yeah, it's really good.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The runway sealant. Now, the sealant is applied once all the grooves have been installed, and then the sealant is applied for the whole length of the runway?
I believe that is correct. I can confirm that, though. That's correct, Peter?
correct.
Thank you.
So then there's a certain amount of time. Who does this friction testing? Is it done by the FAA? We have to wait on them to come here and do that, or
I will get you better details on the timing of that friction testing. Unfortunately, I was not in that call this morning, but I'd be happy to get more details on that before the project commences.
because that'll be a day and night closing, or multiple days. We don't know yet.
In one day,
One day, they're
One day.
thinking? Yeah.
For the sealant,
24 hours for the sealant to cure.
that quick? Huh?
24 hours.
But then there's some kind of a testing that needs to be done, so
Correct, and it may be, Peter, my understanding, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the sealing the runway may take more than one day, and that's why, the closures may take the closure may be for a few days.
Okay.
So that's my understanding, but let me get a better idea of the timing of that friction testing, how soon after everything is applied do they come out and do the testing, and when is it considered?
It's weather dependent.
It's weather
If they apply it and then it rains, then it's going to take longer to cure.
Yeah, yeah.
But if it doesn't rain, then we were told this morning that it's 24 hours. So, and I guess at that time, when we move on to one of the other sections within the agenda, they will have a vehicle come on and he'll get up to a certain speed and he'll brake. And depending on the time that it takes for him to stop, determines whether it's acceptable or not.
I could volunteer for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else for Gale Associates this evening?
Thank you, Jackie.
Oh, thank you, Jack.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jackie. Item 4, Fitchburg Pilots Association. There's no
There's basically nothing to report other than just to remind everybody that the Wings and Wheels is on April the 28th and the Air Affair is on June the 16th. And neither of these actually have any influence on the actual grooving of the runway, which is good.
Yep. Excellent. New business, HRSC. So this is Mr. Kettle's way of toying with the commission. There's no way to prepare for HRSC unless you know what it is. So,
Well, I believe one of the commission members does know what it is.
oh, good.
So, and I'm not looking at anybody in particular, but he's a new member, and it stands for High Resolution Stereoscopic Camera Work. And this is the work that's being done on these that I sent out to everybody. And Rich, if you just want to give one to you and the mayor and pass those through. This work, 2, 3, is the work that's being done to help MassDOT on runways and also road work. And we're closing off, as you know, that certain section of Alpha. And what they're going to do is actually have these special high-resolution stereoscopic cameras. They're mounted on vehicles, and they go over it, and this measures within milliseconds of time and also distance what the smoothness is of wherever they go. And they need a certain distance, and I think it's around about 599 feet that they need to do this test, hence blocking off that part. But the airport remains open while this is done. So they do it and they get a datum. And then they come back in a year or two's time and do exactly the same test, and it determines the amount of wear on the actual taxiway. And they use that as a means to identify whether we need a new runway or not. So this is all development work, and we were the one that they chose, and we accommodated them. So, okay? And it's really at no, inconvenience to any of the pilots, because you can still get down and take off and land. Okay? Thank you.
All right, item 2, NAAS, it never stops.
Actually, it does. NAAS is an abbreviation for a company that I managed to contact. They're currently in Lawrence, and they're building, I think, 22 box hangars. And they are funding this. And I contacted them and said, look, we've got a lot of land for development at Fitchburg. Would you be prepared to come down and do it? And they said, yeah, certainly. So actually at the Wings and Wheels, the gentleman who owns the company is driving his new Corvette down to the Wings and Wheels. And I'm going to meet with him then. But one thing he did say, he will only do it if the city of Fitchburg supplies the utilities. The utilities are going to cost $1 million, and that is not in the budget at the moment. So I'm going to have to give him bad news, but it's bad news for us as well. So just wanted to let everybody know. Okay?
All right, thank you, Peter. Item 3, lining of airport administration parking lot,
Well, for all,
LAAPL.
excellent. For all of you that have been down to the parking lot at the admin building, there's no lines there anymore. People are parking all over the place. And I think, number one, it doesn't look good for the airport because we've got a lovely admin building. We've got a brand new runway, and we've got a parking lot that's in total disrepair as far as I'm concerned. So I contacted Nick Erickson, the commissioner of the DPW, and he said that he would come down and do it as long as we supply the materials. So I said, okay, that's great. But unfortunately, because the city is a little bit behind on the budget was going to use overtime money. Well, unfortunately, I don't have overtime money, and unfortunately, Commissioner Erickson doesn't have overtime money either, so that is going to be delayed until some money becomes available, which is unfortunate because it really needs to be done.
You want us to leave this on the agenda under old business, or?
I think we could take it off until the money becomes available.
Because we really don't know how long that's going
No.
to be.
No, unless the mayor would like to say something.
Can we, if, I would love to be able to find the money for that, Peter, and we will try.
Thank you.
Do you have an idea of how much it would cost?
Well, it's just overtime, and Commissioner Erickson said he could get it done within 2 days. So I don't know how big the crew is,
Yeah.
but whatever the money is normally would be now overtime. And they'll do it after 3 o'clock in the afternoon when overtime takes place, and also on a weekend. So,
He didn't give you a price.
no.
Huh.
I mean, it's easy to formulate.
Yeah.
He knows what the crew size is and how many hours, so
Few $1,000s? Couple thousand?
maybe a couple
I
of
would think, yeah.
$1,000. Yeah.
How much does it cost to
Maybe.
subcontract line guys?
What do you mean?
There's companies that paint parking lot lines and handicap spots and arrows and everything.
Well, it's going to be cheaper for us to pay our guys than to pay somebody to do it who's going to make a profit out of it.
Yeah, but you're paying at an overtime rate. That's what I'm just saying is, and we didn't really fear reaching out to a subcontractor. And
No, it's worth looking at. That's a good point.
I mean, it's just,
It's a good
I mean, if
point.
you're not,
That's a
if
good
you're not in a big rush, then we can wait and let the city do it. I've seen their work. The guys are more than competent, but if it was something that, needed to be done immediately, then you have to reach out to a contractor that does that work.
Yeah, but we still need the money to pay them in
I
any
know.
case, so, but it's a good point. So I'll leave it on.
Oh.
All right?
All right,
And I'll try and address it before the next meeting.
sounds. Item 4, new business, FAA and a $1 million grant.
Yeah, that was for the NAS. I contacted the FAA. They will not provide any money whatsoever for utilities unless it's for the city building the property, building the actual buildings. They will put the utilities in, they'll pay for the utilities, they'll pay 95%, only if the city is building the hangars. But the city's not building the hangars. This gentleman from NAS wanted to do that, and because he's not the city, they're not interested. They won't do it.
So we don't qualify for the grant because.
No.
All right.
No.
And by utilities, you mean actually installing utility feeds?
Right.
And not just utilities for the construction?
No.
Okay.
The utility, it's $1 million to take it from,
Blueberry?
no, Cobbler Drive,
Cobbler.
thank you. From Cobbler Drive to the closest point, to the closest area that it could be moved out into the appropriate areas. But today, I was talking to somebody. He would like to build hangars. He is a distributor for steel, and he also does utilities. So I said to him, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and I'm going to be on your back all the time until you give me an answer. And he's actually down at the airport, one of the tenants, so, which is good. So, we'll leave that on until the next meeting as well.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Item 5, 5%, we're getting a 5% increase in our budget?
Yeah, that's coming down. That's the part that I discussed a minute ago because there's no money available.
So it's a decrease.
Yes, sir.
So have you inputted where you're going to cut?
I've already done it.
You've done it.
I don't know if it's been approved yet. Maya, has it?
What was that?
The reduction in the budget that I applied, you asked for the 3 to 5%, and I actually did it 5%.
Yeah, we are working
Right.
on the budget. That's a,
Yeah, no, the chairman asked if it was done already, and I said
Yeah.
I don't know, so.
no, we're working on the budget. It'll be submitted in May.
But Peter's part is done.
Peter's part is
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you for your diligence.
Of course, of course.
Old business, Wings and Wheels, we've
Discussed.
discussed when, no interruption with the
Airfare,
runway
same.
project.
Yeah,
Arrow Fair as well,
right,
June 16th, did you say? Yep.
yes.
All right, RFP for non-aviation land lease, update.
There was a meeting day before yesterday, and the conclusion of the meeting was that we need to send out to the appropriate people, not just in the area of Fitchburg or Leominster or Boston, but to send it out nationally to people that have operations in every single state in North America that might be interested in building something at the Fitchburg Municipal Airport in Massachusetts. The problem is getting to those people. And the mayor and I were just discussing it, and basically we believe that mass development in Boston could direct us to those particular areas. So that's an area that's going to be looked at. And the RFEI, has been extended to mid-May now. So hopefully we can get out to those people and get their requests for expression of interest back again prior to the closing of the RFEI. So that's ongoing at the moment.
Is there a central hub for, municipal projects, bidding, and a clearinghouse for that kind of stuff? I know there's many sites that specialize in disseminating that kind of information, whether it's government auctions or government projects or RFPs, RFIs.
There is a company that want a lot of money to actually give you the information, and we don't have the money.
Got it.
So, I think if our city development organisation within the city can contact Mass Development and get the information from them,
Sure.
then we could get out from Boston, which would be a big asset.
Yeah.
And I believe that the two people concerned are doing that as
Good.
we speak.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.
Item D, land lease, N Holdings, AKA the Life Flight helicopter hangar.
That's going very, very well. It's exceeding all expectations. They're anticipating moving into the hangar May the 1st,
Oh, good.
which is good news because originally it was identified as being the 16th of June. So that's a big 6-week advance. The good news is that the doctor that's going to take that facility within the admin building is delighted as well because he's ready to go. He's got his website published, not actually published, but it's all done by a consultant. And I looked at it today, and it looks amazing. So we will have on site a doctor that can do second and third class medicals today. And the FAA have seen him, they've met him. He had to go down to Atlanta to be interviewed and to be trained. And after 1 year, he can do first class medicals. So it's really good for the airport, the city, and everybody concerned, because people will fly in, they'll get their medicals, and when the mayor gives us the money for the restaurant, you know, we'll have people come and eat at the city, at the airport as well. So it's one-stop shop.
Jeez,
Medical,
yeah,
food,
we're moving right
and
along.
fuel as well.
And if we had a restaurant, they could go in and have a bite to
That's
eat
what
after.
I just said.
We need a $250 cheeseburger.
Yeah.
We do. We do.
That's great because there are so few AMEs these days.
That's
that are
right.
reputable.
Yeah.
I mean, I go to Nashua, they're hard to source.
No, this is a great thing. So he may be moving in May 1st or maybe June.
He's ready. He's
as soon as it's vacated.
Yeah, about 5 weeks ago, he actually brought the FAA medical people down to the airport, and we took them in and showed them the room. Actually, I showed them the pilot's lounge,
Yeah.
and they said, yeah, this is great, but they want to see it once MedFlight's moved out.
They do.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll clean it all up and get it ready and make it presentable. He'll get his bed in there and
Yeah.
everything else that he needs, and get the FAA in to approve it.
So likely a June timeframe.
I think it'll be mid-May, to be honest, which is good.
Yep. That's good. Item E, minimum standards. Peter, you should remain silent on this as you recused yourself from your input.
Do you have a specific item, or do you want open input? Like, you sent me the document. So.
Correct. I am looking for open input from the commission, and after that, I will also take input from the audience if they wish to speak. I am ready when you are, and I had input from Mr. Liberatore at last month's meeting. If you want to add to it, that's fine, Rich, but yeah, I'd like to make it short and sweet, and let me know your input. I'll put it into this draft, and as well as anyone in the audience, I still want to have their input in this draft as well. And yeah, I'm all ears. If you could just tell me which page
Yep.
I can.
So page 6, number 10. Rather than, that whole note there seems to enhance on it, is beyond the definition of it, but I was thinking there should be a separate section later, either under the business qualification and application for permit, or just a separate section for independent operators, just to lay out what you're putting there, because there's stuff in there about fees and things that really need to be fleshed out.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and I did do that.
Okay. Page 7, what you deleted was itemizing, and I think that what's in blue there, I think you should put like and list them out to make them distinct rather than part of a paragraph.
Yeah, that's Rich's recommendation, and I went along with that as well.
Okay. Page 14. Since I'm new at this, I was looking at some of these, your comment about the part 14 CFR Part 61, and why pilot would not be able to do maintenance, and so I was looking up these other ones, and I couldn't find a Part 127, and I don't think it exists. I think that's just a typo in there. I found that little section where it talks about that
Yeah, what page are you on?
14. Sorry.
You're talking Code of Federal Regulations.
Yeah, it should be noted according to 14 CFR Part 43, blah, blah, blah. And you list those 14 CFR Part 121, 127, 129, 135. It's in the blue on the middle of the page there.
Okay, so when I went through this, I deleted that.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, so it's not, that's fine.
But I want to go back and see why I deleted it.
Okay.
But you're saying
Well,
there's parts in there that don't apply.
Right. It's just that part 127 that's mentioned doesn't exist, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
That's all right. Page 19. Do that, your note in the middle of the page there, the aircraft storage, and you did make a note that that needs to be flushed out more.
Yeah, I was rambling. Yep.
Well, no, it's like, and I was just trying to think of terminology, like if somebody did want a private individual who has a hangar there, who stores an aircraft, what conditions would you think it's okay for them to sublease it without, additional fees or other insurance and meeting some the conditions of this? And so you could put words in there like occasional or non-commercial, like if it's just a friend that's going to store an aircraft there in the same place, under the same conditions, and he's flown down to Florida for the winter, but it's non-commercial, private, individual. But that sort of thing, maybe.
And I was like, yeah, I agree with you, and I think that if the subleasee's activity falls under the definition or meets the definition of the other scheduled activities that are listed here, I think that triggers
Right.
the applicability of that part.
Yep.
But otherwise, if it's just Tom lends, leases part of the hangar to Jackie, and Jackie's not doing anything within the purview of this document, then I think it's exempt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of my rambling was I was toying with the idea, if you're not providing a service on the airport, does the minimum standards apply to you?
Right.
In some cases it does, but in most cases it does not.
If you're not providing a service.
Yeah, right. It's not entirely, it's minimum standards are for commercial users of the airport.
Right.
However, there's a minimum standards that, if you own a hangar, it can't be in disrepair. You may not be providing a commercial service, but your hangar's a mess. Minimum standards would apply in that case.
Well, at least some minimum standards. And maybe we need a section just for private users who aren't providing commercial services.
And I think there is one section that kind of is floating later in the document that kind of addresses that. So on page 22 at the bottom, oh no, that's a different piece.
Exceptions, yeah.
Yeah, but I think in exceptions, in a section that very specifically deals with an individual private pilot owner not engaged in providing services. I think
On a regular basis.
under a regular basis, yeah.
If they're not profiting, if they're only reclaiming their costs in letting someone else use the space. That's.
So today, that rambling I just highlighted in big red and put, short answer, yes, all tenants of the FAC are subject to minimum standards as applicable. But for the private individual, I'm going to go back and see what that entails.
Okay.
What happens is when you start going through this document, then you lose your place.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons I like to put it in paper, so I
Yeah.
don't know whether I scrolled up or down, but at least I know when I turn
And
the
as
page.
I'm not a pilot, it's like, would a pilot, who has a hangar need to provide, like you said, in some of these sections, there's minimum of $1 million liability insurance, or do they already have to do that for their own?
They have hangar keepers insurance.
Okay, yeah.
They have hull insurance on their airplane.
But it's their own space, it's not
The hangar
providing
is
commercial.
typically excluded.
Right. So, again,
Okay,
it deserves a revisit.
And we should
Okay.
be very careful about not imposing requirements that historically weren't imposed, and there's been no harm to date.
yeah.
Right? I mean, if it hasn't been an issue to date, I would say do nothing is probably a viable strategy.
Yeah. And then, I'll let you finish that.
Anything else, Eric?
Yeah, page 22. At the top there, number 13. We talked about this a little bit last month. And you're torn on the bit about excluding someone who's been convicted of a felony or something like that.
Yes.
And I was thinking about that too, because I just renewed my amateur radio license. And I had to check a box on the FCC site that asked me if I've ever been convicted of a felony.
Yeah.
And so I think it may be sufficient to allow the fact that they have to be licensed, they have to have permits, they have to go through whatever processes to do what they're going to do, that should cover anything like that and maybe shouldn't be part of our purview. But if you look back at number 9 on the previous page, you have something about the applicant having a record of violating rules and regulations, and I would say of this or any other airport or federal aviation regulations, and let that just cover what, because you also said that in number 13 a little bit as well.
Okay.
So I'd say, if that's satisfactory to exclude the legal part of it from that standpoint and just talk about a record of having, and you talk about that below too with, for violating leases and things.
So because this was lifted from the 1977 standards, or 73, don't quote me on that, but I'm going to leave it in there, and I'm going to let the attorney
Okay.
decide whether that's okay to keep or not.
Okay. But I still would change then the terminology on number 9 to add, because you say of any other airport. I would say of this or any other airport, or just any airport. And the same goes for number 4 in page 22 at the bottom there, because that's the same phrasing.
Yeah, good point.
That's all I had other than.
Could have an infraction
nits.
at 100 airports, but not this one. I suppose.
Gotcha.
I don't know if you want nits or anything like that, like numbering. I know that the first set is a little off there because there was some.
Yeah, well, when I went through mine and deleted and subtracted and added, some of my pages got messed up as well. But
Yeah.
I'm
The
not
only
going to
other-
fix pages until we fix everything else in it. So.
Okay, that's fine. The only other nit I had was at page 28. This is for independent operators, but you put the IO, point of contact IO, but on the previous application, you just have operators. And I would just use the same terminology, just use operators, because it's under the application for independent operators already.
So a SASO and an independent operator are not one and the same. So,
Okay. No, but the SASO has operators, right? So you're listing,
oh, you're saying there's a missing page on SASOs?
no, that's there on page 26. I was just saying that you're saying operators who will perform the work, and over here you have, operators who's going to perform the work, but you use IO instead. I don't know if that's a specific term or a common term.
Well, IO is referring to the independent operator, yeah.
Yeah, you could spell it independent operators if you want to, but I was just saying be consistent.
Well, if you had Peter's way, we wouldn't have any words on this thing at all. Just that.
Alphabet soup.
That's it.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate your work in that. Paul, anything that Eric did not cover
Yeah,
that
actually,
you?
We have slightly different issues. I would say on page 6, I think the independent operator clause or definition, and I think somewhere later in the document, let me find it. So on page 22, I think that this, if you go to the bottom of page 22, with the allowed exception, I think that also has to be addressed sort of in the independent operator. It seems like those two are linked, tied at the hip. And I can see why it is on page 22 in terms of application for a permit. And I do wonder about, you know, how dynamic these events are. So for instance, if I blew a tire on my airplane, and I would call Columbia Aircraft Services in Groton, Connecticut, and they would say, well, we can fly one up now. You know, these are pretty dynamic situations in terms of maintenance people coming in that are not based at the airport to quickly get an airplane airworthy again. And I wonder, you know, how much we want to, you know, create requirements around something that is that simple. Somebody flies in and makes a quick repair.
Well-
That one's definitely like an emergency situation, whereas I think the other one is more like independent operators who may regularly provide services.
But there is actually a clause in here somewhere, which I can't find now, but it's notifying the airport manager of the presence of someone who is coming in who is an outside maintenance provider. I think we just need to make clear that on an emergency basis, that's,
I'm going to read you what I wrote down for independent operator. I added it in after unmanned aircraft systems. I put independent operators.
yeah.
I put any persons or firm or legal entity without an established business location at the airport engaged in commercial aeronautical activity on the airport. Then I go on to say the Fitchburg Airport Commission does not exclude independent operators from performing specific tasks on aircraft owned or operated by aircraft tenants. The independent operator must be approved by the airport manager prior to any work to begin. The application must provide information as outlined in Appendix 2, blah, blah, blah. The independent operator must be in compliance with general liability insurance minimums outlined below. Proof of insurance must be provided by the insurer. So, yeah, for this to happen in an emergency, it's a problem.
This is exactly the clause I was referring
Right.
to. So, you know, A, the chances of people being compliant with that are zero, and B, you know, what is served by that sort of layering of requirements. I think there has to be an emergency exemption. Thank you for finding that. That was the part I was looking for. I mean, obviously, you know, if someone is repeatedly doing business on a drive-by basis, it's a completely different situation from someone who happens to have the alternator you need for your Cessna, and they can fly it down from, you know, Nashua tomorrow. So thank you for that. On page 9, your note that says how leases are calculated based on the CPIU, and it says, and in no time will it decrease. Is that referring to it can never be adjusted for deflation?
That's correct.
Because on page 28, we
Yeah.
then have a clause
Says
that
it again.
well, it says you can adjust it up or down.
Yeah. I red flagged that as well.
Great, so you got that, cool. Let's see here. No, we got that, you covered that. On page 12, we're referring to discrimination based on race, color, gender, identity, or national origin. Are we missing religion, or just, is that a standardized clause these days?
What page?
We're on page 12, halfway down, 32.1. And the basis of discriminations that are listed does not include religion. I don't know whether there's a boilerplate, something that the attorney will put in, the city attorney.
I will, it's, in all likelihood, I lifted that off the minimum standards policy. I will check.
Not a biggie. I would just reword on page 14, where we talk about business qualification, application for lease. The third line of that paragraph where it says, in no case shall an applicant submit anything less than the following information. You might reword that as at a minimum.
What page are we on? Sorry.
I'm on page 14,
Yeah.
halfway down, that middle paragraph about business qualification. I would just submit at a minimum the following. It just reads better. Just a general question on insurance on page 23. So, there are aviation-centric businesses that, obviously there are ones that require a physical presence and require the use of things like they're fueling or they're welding or they're cutting, or there are activities that obviously you'd want the city to be an additional named insured, because those are potentially activities that could cause a hazard. I'm just wondering if there are other businesses, for instance, a flight planning service or an aviation medical examiner. Is it really necessary to have the city named as an additional insured on their policies? Because it's never trivial. If you are operating a business as a sole proprietor, and it's really just a body and a telephone and a computer, or a blood pressure machine in this case, it's non-trivial to add the city as an additional named insured. Is that clause on page 23, clause 8, does it really hold true for every single business?
That I can't answer.
I'm just thinking about barriers to entry for
Right.
somebody that might want to occupy an office and provide an aviation-related service, like flight planning or our soon-to-be AME, which is great news. I just wonder if there's cause for that. Something to think about. That's what I
Okay.
got. Thank you. It looks really good.
Thank you. Mark or Daniel? I know you wanted to speak.
I do, thank you. Good evening. It's great to see the minimum standards coming together, and I appreciate all the great comments. There were a lot of really good comments. I know, Richie, I wasn't here last month, but I did hear from other people that you had also some good comments. I love seeing the interaction here. So we were hoping to get a draft to you prior to tonight. We didn't make it, and I apologize. We are in the process of drafting to try and help out in cleaning up some of the language and pointing out wherever we see some discrepancies. But I did pull out some of the concerns we might have, and you've talked about some of them tonight. So it's just 5 points that I'll raise. I'll apologize in advance. I didn't do a good job because we're playing with the document. The page numbers aren't going to align with whatever you're looking at. So we'll have to just sort of sort through this, but I think you'll know most of what I'm talking about. The first one is on page 19, because you referenced it earlier, this idea of what do you do with renters. So I own a hangar and I rent it to somebody with a plane. I think everybody's in alignment that that's not intended that they would be a commercial operation, and minimum standards apply for insurance purposes, et cetera. So I think you had some great ideas. If you can come up with language that's generic, that's far better than what I'm about to say, but we did try to come up with something. So a rental of space in a building or hangar of not more than 3 aircraft by a single building or hangar owner might be exception. I think that covers most everyone on the field. The other one would be a rental or building or hangar space by a nonprofit organization. So this, particularly the FPA, right? We rent to 4 aircraft, and that helps pay for our mortgage and our expenses, our lease. And it's not really a business, it's just a way we cover our expenses. But if we were required to abide by the insurance requirements here, et cetera, that would certainly cause some distress for us. I'm just going to make a point in there somewhere.
Marcus, being part of an EAA chapter, does that afford any insurance?
We do, yes. So we do have insurance on the hangar. We don't have hangar keeper insurance on it, but we do have general liability insurance for it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not necessarily consistent with what's in the minimum standards. I don't think that it's necessarily far off, but it's not necessarily consistent either. So we'd have to go back and look at exactly how to match them up if we were held to those same standards.
Right.
I'm also concerned about people like the FPA Co-op who has, if you get a kite, a small aircraft, you can put several aircraft in there, and so that's why we picked the number of 3 to try and cover that sort of circumstance where it's not a business for them. So I think some of your ideas about where not providing other services, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And that was the point I wanted to make. The only thing you might want to think about, Doesn't exist on the field today, but theoretically somebody could build a couple of big hangars, and that could be their business of renting out hangar space. So if you write something too generic, they end up getting a free ride on those insurance policies, at least for the minimum standards. In that case, their sole purpose was to rent space, right?
Well, they're providing a commercial service,
What's the commercial service other than hangar space?
which is to house hangars for profit.
Yeah, so then I'm back to how do you just, so again, I'll take me as an example. I'm not doing this, but
Yeah.
if I were renting to an aircraft owner my space, is that not a commercial business? I'm deducting the amortization of my hangar on my taxes, so, okay. So I just don't know where to draw that line. That's what we're all struggling with.
Yeah.
Again, I think we have the same idea. I just don't know exactly how to write those words for it.
Yeah.
Well, you're an accredited organization of some sort, so you have specific, an identity is different from a commercial organization because you have membership that you're discussing as using the space or renting it to. That's not anybody arbitrarily. You have members that are part of an organization that exists.
In the case of the FPA you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that can be covered easily by saying a nonprofit organization. Well, for us, we didn't have to be, but we are a 501c3. So that's one way to do it, or describe it as an organization like that, sure.
Yeah.
That takes care of that exception, but then how do you take care of somebody who's got a hangar and they're renting out a couple of spots in that hangar? So this is a good example. We have one hangar owner who probably owns 10 hangars. They don't have an aircraft. They're not a pilot. They just bought them and they rent them out.
Yeah.
Where do they fall?
That's,
Right.
I would say that's commercial, and make the distinction that it's non-commercial if you or your organization members are exclusively who uses it for a certain percentage of the time, let's say.
Yeah, but that gets us in trouble again because let's take FPA Co-op, right? They have got 3 hangars. I've got 3 hangars there. And, well, I guess there's one of them who owns it has a plane in there, but the other one, the owners aren't in that hangar. Their planes aren't there. They're renting it to some friends. Are we really trying to put the minimum standards on them? I don't think so. Yeah, it's tough, right? You're trying to draw this line through this set of legalese, for lack of a better term. So, yeah, it's a challenge.
I guess it depends if it's a one-to-one type sublease or a one-to-many business arrangement. I mean, in the case where the objective is to either have more than one subtenant and grow that business.
Yes.
Versus,
Right.
I'm just not using the space, I'm going to let someone else pay me to
Right.
use it.
Yeah, and so we can describe it sort of that way. Now, how do you codify that in the terms of the minimum standards?
Yes, exactly.
It's a struggle. So in any case, we can offer those couple of ideas, but I think you've got maybe some better ones anyway. Independent operators and the requirements of those independent operators. I got scared a little bit, Mr. Chairman, when you talked about putting the minimum insurance requirements back on the independent operators. So we had talked about there may be, for independent operators, an $800 annual fee. And then you can do what you need to do people's annuals, make repairs, qualify their pedostatic systems, et cetera. What we were going to propose was that if they met one of the 3 conditions, $800 per year, 10% of their annual revenue, which they have to show summary invoices of, or meeting the general liability insurance requirements of the minimum standards. If they met any of those 3, then they're approved to work on the field.
So the problem with a fee is you could have somebody doing $110 worth of work, and we're going to saddle them with a fee of $800.
Right. The fee's just a simple, easy transactional thing, but it's not a perfect solution. Sure.
Correct.
Yep.
Then if we were to tag a 10% charge for the invoice, let's say, and the guy puts $1 million worth of radios in a plane, I'd be real happy with a $100,000 fee.
That's why I say it's or. So pick your choice here. So that person putting $1 million of radios in the aircraft, he would say, well, I'll pay you the $800 fee and we'll call it good, right? That's what they would do. And that's what we're suggesting. So you have to cover exactly the case you talk about where the revenue is very low, so the 800 is very high.
Yeah.
All right, then give 10%. All right, here's your $10 and we're good to go.
That in itself is a problem,
Sorry, which part's the problem?
whether we go with a fee or a 10%.
Well, can you do it or?
Yeah, can you say
Either the
minimum?
fee or the percentage or just meet the standards, and then you're covered. If any of those three conditions are met, you're approved.
All right. So I understand on the 10% or the fee. What I don't understand is the third part where you say, well, as long as he's got insurance, he doesn't apply for the fee or the insurance or the 10%?
Yeah, so let's go back to why that's in there in the first place. So, and it's for good reasons, right? The FAA is very supportive of the idea that you need to, particularly where they're sole competitors on a field, you need to protect those businesses. So the idea that somebody pays a lease to the airport and carries inventory and has staff on hand and pays all of that overhead, their costs are going to be higher than someone who's doing their A&P or pedostatic testing, whatever, for annuals, and then pedostatic testing out of their plane, and they just fly in, and they do the work, and they fly out. They can do it more cheaply than Twins at Fitchburg Airport. That's a fair concern. And Twins also has to make sure they have that $1 million liability insurance there. So the first rendition of this we had is everybody's got to meet the minimum standards for insurance. And we argued that those minimum standards for insurance are very high and onerous for these independent operators. Case in point, and this is where this sort of blew up last year, we had, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but an A&P who flew in, has been doing it for years, has 3 or 4 aircraft, I think he does an annual on, and didn't meet any insurance requirements, and then that sort of exploded. Like, okay, you need to meet them. So last year he did, and he got the insurance, and all that cost is passed on to the aircraft owners. So they did that to meet the existing minimum standards because these haven't been ratified yet. We talked about proposing an alternative for a case like that where instead of doing these insurance levels, which can be expensive or even impossible to get, the $1 million's not, right? We originally talked about 2, and that's almost impossible for people to get for this kind of activity. So at least we're at a more reasonable insurance level, but still costs significant money. So exactly to your point, if somebody's just coming in for a few $100 service, change out the alternator, repair the tire, whatever, that's just an onerous condition. So we talked about, well, how do we deal with this? Well, percentages are difficult to maintain over time and manage just the logistics and the paperwork. A fee is very simple. It's imperfect because it could be too high, but at least it's something that you've got to pay to play on the airport, pay your quote-unquote fair share. So that's how we all came to that. And so the percentage versus the fee is just trying to find a mechanism to be reasonable, I guess, or give some people some options. Again, as you said, if it's a $300 charge for the work, then an $800 fee is pretty onerous. So,
Sure.
In terms of prior art, what are other airports doing about this conundrum? I mean, what does Nashua do, Bedford do, in terms of man-with-a-van type repair operations versus established leaseholders?
I don't know off the top of my head.
so we're pretty sure that Nashua, I don't know Bedford, Nashua has a minimum standards for operators on the field, but they don't enforce it consistently. I'm not sure what they do for independent operators. I think they don't, if they're not enforcing it for the operators, I don't think they're enforcing on the independent operators.
So if an operator just pays a fee and something happens that needs insurance to cover it, would it be the airport's insurance that it would fall under? Wouldn't that fee be their cost to purchase in effect from us coverage for the services they're doing as part, and which they would pass on as well?
No, there's not a direct liability for the city in these activities. And that was a lot of the argument we made in saying, $2 million, which was the original request for or proposal for what the insurance level should be. It's like there isn't a direct liability for the city for operators or independent operators. So if a mechanic comes on the field and he screws up and the carburetor's not attached to the engine and the plane takes off and power's lost and they crash and burn. Where's the city's liability there?
Well, who is liable then?
So the A&P would be liable. The aircraft operator would be liable. We as aircraft owners and operators are liable or are required to make sure it's an airworthy aircraft.
And the insurance policy on the aircraft would cover damage to people or property
Right.
on the surface, which would
Right.
include the airport as a claimant.
Okay.
Right. So you can never say that it's Massachusetts, anybody can sue anybody at any time for anything, but there's no direct causal link we can find there on the insurance side. But there's still another aspect, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'd be really interested to see what other airports are doing about this. I can do it at home.
Most airports have some kind of an insurance requirement for operators on the field. This independent operator concept is not commonly discussed.
Right. It's too thorny an issue and they turn a blind eye.
I don't know if it's too thorny of an issue or it's just not an issue, right? You have somebody fly in, they do some work, they're gone a day later, and nobody's paying that much attention, is that concerned about it.
And would you agree that probably the reason for that is it's specialized work like pedostatic certifications that other folks on the airport just aren't doing? Maybe someone else's, the brick and mortar on the airport is doing, for instance, like thinking about, Twin City doing annuals, for instance, but then you've got someone like Eckhard Strader could fly in and do static system certifications.
Yep, and he does.
Requires specialized knowledge, specialized equipment. He's got it down to an art. It's very inexpensive.
Right. And fabric aircraft. So there's many aircraft twins either cannot or will not work on the field. So we have some people who get stranded. And I'll take myself as an example. Last summer I was stranded. I had an alternator issue and twins would not work on the aircraft.
Wow.
So now what do I do? We as far as I know, to answer your question, I'm not aware. We have done a lot of research on the operators and the insurance requirements on that, and most airports in our area do have minimum insurance requirements listed. But again, if we talk to the levels, $2 million is not uncommon for the larger airports, but it is for an independent A&P is virtually impossible to obtain.
I'm interested in the examples you just gave in terms of services which are not available at the airport being a potential path for exemption. So an interesting kind of way to think about this is if someone like Twin City, for instance, is not offering fabric repair, they don't work on light aircraft, they don't do pedostatic.
Turbines.
They don't do turbines.
Right.
So perhaps there's a path there to, it's not an issue of exclusivity, but for instance, it's just simply a service they do not provide. An existing FBO or specialized entity on the airport doesn't offer that service. So perhaps there's a path to carving out ways for outside providers to fill the gap, right?
Well, does that exemption that's in here, that specifically says it's an emergency service? And maybe we need to flesh out more of what would consist in, it's like you're stranded.
Yes.
As opposed to your aircraft is there, it needs something done, you're not going anywhere, you live there.
Sure.
And you need something.
So if the aircraft is unairworthy,
Well, I think you change it to emergency and or an unsupported service at the airport.
so I just want to, so it's fair, and that's a valid area as we discussed, but there are other areas as well. So, and I'll use myself as an example where there's mechanics on the field who are capable of doing the work but are not going to do the work.
Understood.
And I'd hate to exclude that sort of clientele or owner-operators. And it is becoming more, it's becoming more of an issue. We don't have enough A&Ps. The ones we have are headed to the airlines. It's extremely difficult to get A&Ps to work on our aircraft that are competent in those aircraft. So, any way we can, people are going to figure out a way to make it work. And, I think doing it above board and with transparency is far better than people trying to figure out another way to do it. So we don't have enough A&P IA services on the field today to service the aircraft that are on the field, even ignoring the fabric and turbine situations. So how do those people get supported? If they can, they'll fly away, and many do fly and get their annuals done and their maintenance done elsewhere, but that can't always happen because the aircraft is not airworthy. So when it's unairworthy, we're stuck.
What is A&P?
Oh, sorry.
Airframe and power plant mechanic, so you're an FAA licensed mechanic.
Sorry about that.
Another
That's
area.
right.
I'll be your resident A&P.
I was going to
I'm
say,
an A&P.
there's a bunch of acronyms I don't know yet.
Mark, your points are valid. You mentioned we need to protect the two operators or the operators that are already on the airport. We don't need to protect them. We need to find a way to make it fair,
Yes.
okay? We cannot exclude an independent operator from entering the airport. If requiring $1 million liability insurance effectively excludes him from being able to do things on the airport, well, that's a problem as well. You know, the FBOs pay a few $1,000s a month to rent their space and have the $14 million runway and have, everything the way it is. So a part of that fee is, a user fee. And that's what we're trying to get out of somebody that's coming in and doing a pedostatic check. And he does the $600 check or whatever it costs, and the airport gets nothing out of it. That's a problem, right? So I just wanted to clarify that.
I appreciate that, and you're right. That's far better language. But I'll add to that you say that there's no benefit to the airport when they come in and service the aircraft on the field. I would disagree with that a little bit because you have a healthy GA population that is in part healthy because they can get services. If they can't, then eventually that population will erode and you won't get the land leases and you won't get the fuel purchases, et cetera, and the taxes, property taxes that the city gets. So I do think it's not direct, but I do think there's an indirect benefit and importance of having that healthy GA population at Fitchburg Airport.
Yeah, point taken.
Okay. There's a section on permit applications, and the airport manager shall approve, and I apologize, the section, it's application for permits, section 5. I don't know the page. Airport manager shall approve or disapprove within 7 business days. Otherwise, the application will be reviewed by FAC, and if FAC does not provide a denial of the application within 40 days, the application will be approved. So that was just a cleanup of language that our draft that we had submitted was too loose. So you and I talked about that, so there needs to be a tighter, more time to decide and a definitive closure with the airport commission. So that's the language we're going to propose for that paragraph. That's all. The next one's on the FBO buildings, where there's this clause for FBOs specifically that the minimum area, leased area for when a hangar is built or the building is built was originally 1.1 times, and it was changed to 1.3. Not a huge deal. What all we would say is that 1.1 is a minimum standard. All these things are managed by the lease that you sign at the end of the day. So if you have an FBO that, let's say they're a full-service organization like Twins, where they're doing a lot of stuff, you got a lot of conversations. What's my public access? Is the walkway paved or otherwise maintained to the public and in good order? Do I have ramp space? Do I have storage space for aircraft that are parked outside? There's a lot of conversations in there that define what that leased area should be. I don't think 1.1 or 1.3 is the biggest of your concerns there. I think the 1.1 speaks to when you have a building, it's recognized that there's a little bit of space around the building that you end up using, whether you're planting shrubs or whether you're putting stuff outside. At a minimum, you've got to have some kind of buffer around that building. The 1.3 it doesn't make a lot of sense to us because you'll capture the necessary parts for expanded space in the lease itself. So we would propose you go back to 1.1 again as a minimum standard. You can always up that in the ground lease. That's all.
In that same paragraph, I believe there was an additional 1.5 times space for aircraft to be parked, serviced, brought outside, so forth and so on. So
yeah,
you're right. When an FBO comes or a tenant comes to the airport and wants to establish an FBO,
right,
he's not going to be able to do it in a 6,000 square foot hangar with 6,200 square feet of space. because he needs places to park his help, his dumpsters,
Yep.
the customers,
Yes.
vendors,
Yep.
and run up the airplane and bring them outside and switch them, the whole 9 yards. So I'm not really sure why a minimum space for an FBO was actually in the original minimum standards.
Fair point.
There's just no way you could operate an FBO at the airport with even double the hangar space in land.
Yeah, I have a hard time disagreeing or agreeing with that because I don't know what the service is. So, for example, if you're just doing paint, right, like when I had my aircraft painted, it went up to Vermont.
Yeah.
There's nothing around the hangar because
Yeah.
they don't do paint outside the hangar, right? So you go in the hangar, you close the door, and that's it. If you're doing a twins type operation, you got aircraft all over the place at different times. So I don't know. I think your point's well taken. I don't know why any minimum is specified. The 1.1, I mean, I just look at it as you're planting flowers, it's minimum. So
Yeah.
until you know what the business is, it's hard to describe.
Right.
So, but anyway, it's not a huge deal. We just think it's not perfect. The other one, the last one we wanted to bring up was that, and again, I apologize, I don't have the page, but it's leasing terms for the city-owned land and Section 2 of that. There's an understandable desire that if the FAA has a requirement that needs to be implemented in the grant assurances and that sort of thing, those obligations need to be reflected in whatever leases exist. But the language, we would just like to tighten that language up to say as mandated by the FAA rather than just mentioned by the FAA, which is sort of where the language sits now. You could interpret it in any direction. So if it's a requirement by the FAA, we understand the leases have to be updated. I know your square footage is something you want to do that's not mandated by the FAA, but that we might pull out separately and just say all leases will be, as part of the minimum standards, all leases will be in square footage. We have no objection to that.
Yes, so last month's meeting, we did in fact, a motion was made to, all leases on the airport will have a square footage base rate.
Right.
And it would be based on square footage. We didn't talk about how much that would be or what size that would be, just that if you're going to rent a space, even the doctor's office, we need to know how much square footage of that room is when that lease is written.
Yeah, it seems very equitable.
Yeah.
So you're treating everyone fairly. So, yeah, we don't see any issues with that.
Yeah.
We just don't want to leave an open door that, hey, the FAA is promoting X, Y, or Z. Okay, we're going to rewrite your leases that are already existing. Well, unless it's mandated by and I'm not talking about square footage, but unless something's mandated by the FAA, it's not fair to go back and rewrite a lease just based on something the FAA wrote. Unless it was mandated.
Unless it was mandated.
Unless it was mandated, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We can't argue with that. Those are the inputs. Do you want me to send you an email? Do you want me to just leave you a piece of paper?
If you
Say
send me
nothing?
an email, it keeps it tidy. Yeah,
Yep.
I wouldn't mind.
Okay, and the last thing is, it sounds like you've made a bunch of changes since the last time we had a draft.
Yeah.
Would it make sense for you to send me the latest draft so we're working from that one and don't crisscross with a bunch of edits?
I don't have an issue with that. However, the back and forth is going to end soon. I
Yeah.
hope to have this in a draft or final copy for presentation to the FAA and the city solicitor
Okay.
in a June timeframe.
Yeah. Yeah, and you gave us that timeline, and I apologize we didn't get it to you by today. We should have.
Yeah,
We just weren't able to do it.
You guys were very helpful in at least, putting a Word document that I could actually modify with, again, the pages are now wrong, the titles are now incorrect, but
Right.
in time, I'd like to get that straightened out. I think tonight was good to, address the independent operator.
Yep.
I thought we were over the insurance hurdle.
Well, we certainly are for everything other than the independent operator, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. All right, in closing, I'm going to take the suggestions this evening and try to tidy that up into a revision 3 draft. I'll send it to you guys during the month. Don't share your opinions amongst each other, and we'll come back to next month's meeting and see if we can have something with a lot less revisions.
Super close.
Good. Thank you. Item F, Crawford Street Safety Update.
First of all, Commissioner Erickson offers his apologies for not being here.
Yep.
But he did tell me that due to the constraints now applied by the mayor and the city of the 5% decrease in budget, he's not going to use Chapter 90 funds for the consultant that was doing the work on Crawford Street, and for the 2 new commissioners, the danger areas where people keep on going through the fence, down the embankment, etc., etc. And he's doing that mainly to help save staff layoffs, because that's how serious it's getting. So basically, what he's agreed to do is go back to MassDOT, which he started off in the first place. So we're back to MassDOT's, hopefully, resolution to the problem on Crawford Street.
That's to do their assessment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, to prevent the gate from getting crashed.
Why did they not, again, I don't understand. I briefly spoke to the commissioner about why the MassDOT Traffic Bureau wasn't getting right back to him. And he didn't know. He thought they were tied up on a different issue, but he was staying on top of it with them, you know, making it known that this is an imperative meeting that we have to have. And
Well, they were dragging their feet, and he decided to go out to a consultant,
yeah,
and the money was going to come from the Chapter 90 funds. But now that's stopped, so he's going to jump back onto MassDOT. Okay?
obviously something has to be done, because we're not going to invest monies into a brand-new 10-foot fence and have people crashing into it. It's
Yeah.
just ridiculous.
We can't
This has
afford to
got to be
repair it,
solved
neither can the
now
city.
before the fencing
Yeah.
phase comes
But
in.
we do have 2 years,
Yeah,
so.
okay.
Don't tell MassDOT that.
Yeah,
Nope.
I will never see.
Item F, you all set with that, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Item F, financial review, approval of commitments and abatements. Is there anything we need to look at this
There isn't any.
evening?
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Executive session, there is none this evening. Date and time of next regular meeting is May 15th, 2024, 6 p.m. I'd like a roll call to adjourn. Would anybody like to end this meeting? Motion to adjourn?
Seconded?
Motion to adjourn.
You don't want to stay longer?
No, I need to go.
Meeting adjourned. It's 7:20. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Great.